Good morning. This is Eric the Rural Xer here with you on a absolutely gorgeous Tuesday afternoon, December 26, 2022, here in my house. It's been a very cold Christmas this year. We've had temperatures down as low as 3 degrees, which for around here is extremely cold. In fact, it was so cold that our water froze Friday morning, and we didn't have any water from Friday until Sunday over the weekend. So we had to pretty much do without water right into Christmas Day, the 25th. But fortunately, we got home after church and was doing some stuff around here, and we heard it come back on, so we were very thankful for that. Just want to say that I hope that everybody had a very Merry Christmas, and I only wish for you the happiest of New Year's coming into 2023. I just wish for you health and happiness, and I hope that you got everything that you wanted for Christmas this year. But most of all, I hope that you was able to spend quality time with family and loved ones, friends, and just had a really good time. And may God bless you. With that being said, we'll get into what this video is all about. This video was actually shot a couple of days after Thanksgiving this year. And to give you a little bit of information about how we ended up going on this trip, my brother had actually bought the tickets for a train trip from Tennessee. Well, actually, the whole trip is in Tennessee, from Delano, Tennessee, down to Copperhill, Tennessee, through what they call the Hiwassee Loop, or Bald Mountain Loop, whatever you want to call it. I've heard it called by several different names. Hiwassee Loop, Etowah Loop, Bald Mountain Loop. I guess they're all pretty accurate. But anyway, he had bought these two tickets for him and his wife. They were planning on riding the train down in a dome car, which we actually got to do on this train trip. But at the last minute, he had a really good friend of his that had passed away, and he felt like he needed to go to the funeral. It was one of his roommates back in college, so he wanted to do something with the tickets, so he contacted me to see if I wanted them. And after some debate with my wife about whether we need to go, because there was only two, and we wasn't sure what to do with my daughter, but after some discussion with her, she was all right with us going by ourselves this time. If we went on the train trip again, we would definitely take her with us. So that's what we ended up agreeing to do. So anyway, that's what this whole thing is about this train trip. It's a scenic train trip through the historic, like I said, whatever you want to call it. I can give you some history about what it is and what it does, what the loop is. It's an actual train loop that goes clear around the mountain and loops back over itself. But I won't bore you with too much of that information, because it's actually in the video by the host of the train that was doing a lot of the announcements on the way down. And he gave a lot of information. I recorded it all. So with that being said, well, let's get into the video. I hope you enjoy it. Oh, by the way, before I go, this is a very long video because we recorded pretty much the whole train trip down, off and on. And we even recorded some segments down in Copperhill, where me and my wife went and ate lunch at a little Italian restaurant, and walked around, done a little bit of shopping and stuff like that. So the video is about an hour and 40 minutes long. So what I have decided to do is break it down into 20 to 30 minute segments to make it more manageable to watch, in case you don't want to sit down and watch the whole thing. But I'll also upload the whole video itself from beginning to end as well, and put it all in a playlist for you, so you can choose whichever way you want to watch it. So with that being said, let's get into the video. Here's the train. That's one of the dome cars. Two dome cars on this train today, plus some other passenger cars on the other back. There may be even three, if I'm not badly mistaken. It's a very foggy morning this morning, and as you can tell, from the picture. It's very foggy this morning, but I will see if I can get a shot of that dome car that we are going to be in, and then we'll go on inside and I'll show you the inside of it. Now here's the dome car that we're going to be in. It's actually on the very end of the railroad. So that's where we're at right there. And Teresa's up there in the very front of that dome car waiting on me. So I better get on back there.
You're good, baby.
We're now on the train and looking out on bird's eye view of the
Here, put it right here. Yeah.
the dome car. And we are in the very
Here, Justin.
well, actually, we're on the very back of the car, facing towards the front of the train. That's where we're
Hey,
at.
Justin. Slip that in that bag over there, please.
So here is our bird's eye view.
There's 2 tables back there with the salad.
Yeah.
I don't believe so. Greg,
This thing keeps on pulling my hair.
9 o'clock on the dot, and we are rolling. Here we go. The train horn has sounded, and we are rolling. But it is still very foggy outside. But hopefully this fog will lift, or we'll get out of it on down the rails. So here we go.
Everybody, Car 2, turn around. Wave Mr. Jeff Dearman. He's our host in our commissary, our store here in Car 2. And our first class host today is Mr. Josh Monroe. Now, in the head locomotive today, we're in great shape. We have our road foreman, Mr. Jody Brantley, as engineer, and our senior conductor, Mr. Dave Stoika, as our head-end conductor. He's actually the conductor in charge of the train and the trip. So on behalf of everybody with the Hiwassee District of the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us today. Now there are some rules to walk us through town. They painted it blue. They have a state line. They painted it blue all through the streets. You can stand in 2 states at once. It even goes through the middle of several businesses. There's one very good restaurant, the Copperhill. They actually fix your food in Georgia, but it gets better when you bring it to Tennessee. They have to step over that state line, and it gets magically better. There's other places we'll talk about, all the restaurants there in town, later when we get closer to town. But
We are rolling right along right now. We don't have much to see except some woods over here at the moment, but from what our conductor told us just now, that eventually on down the line we will be seeing more scenery on this side than on the right side going down. But they asked us to swap sides when on the trip back, so people on the other side can see what we're seeing now going down. So here we go.
this railroad was the idea formed by the businessmen and city leaders of the city of Knoxville. Back in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, if you wanted to ship something from Knoxville to Atlanta, Georgia, it had to go through Chattanooga. Oftentimes it would get delayed a day or so, reclassifying to a different train. So they came up with the idea of saving some time by having a direct route between Knoxville, Tennessee and Atlanta, Georgia. So in 1885, they contracted with 2 different railroads. The first railroad was formed in 1885, was the Knoxville Southern Railway. They started in Knoxville and worked their way south. Now they also contracted with the Marietta and North Georgia Railroad. They had already built from Marietta, Georgia up to Canton, Georgia, so they just kept going north out of Canton when they started this project. And those 2 crews met in an area we're going to go through today called Appalachian Station on the evening hours of June 30th, 1890. Now that day was very important to the track guys. They were promised a big bonus if they got the railroad finished before July 1st. Well, just like all the other railroads like us, they went down to the last minute, but they finished it. They completed it on the evening hours of June 30th. So the city of Knoxville gave all that money to one of the vice presidents of the Knoxville Southern, who promptly disappeared. Yes, he took the money and run even before Steve Miller was born. They found him about 2 weeks later, found most of the money, and they gave most of the track workers their big bonus of a whopping $12.42. Hey, that might have been pretty good money in 1890, I don't know.
Right.
But they did finish the line on time. The very first freight trains ran from Atlanta to Knoxville and Knoxville to Atlanta on July 1st. And the very first passenger train was just a ceremonial 4th of July train was run a few days later, and regular passenger service started in September of 1890. Now once the line was completed, they figured, oh, we got it made, right? Not really. You see, they went up one of the mountains, the easy to construct way, but the hard to negotiate way. They built a series of switchbacks. The train literally had to zigzag up and down the mountain, up the mountain, back and forth. And they had other problems with it. We'll tell you all about that zigzag, that switchback. But the switchbacks proved to be a headache. It slowed the trains down, so that one day they thought they would gain, they actually lost getting the trains up and down the mountain. Eventually those two companies went bankrupt, and they reformed as one company called the Atlanta, Knoxville, and Northern. And they are the ones that built what we'll ride through today up Bald Mountain, the Loop, the Bald Mountain Loop. Once they built the loop, operations became a lot easier. And in 1906, L&N purchased the railroad. It was an L&N railroad from then on to the time L&N merged in with the Family Line system, then the Seaboard system, and on to the CSX days. But by the time CSX got to it, a lot of the businesses had already gone under around here. And the death knell to this line was when the copper industry folded in Copperhill. So CSX abandoned the line and put it up for sale around the year 2000. And that's when the company that bought what was left of the copper complex, they bought this line and got a great deal. Almost 50 miles of track for only $1.6 million. That's a steal, right? Well, not really, because CSX had deferred maintenance on the track for several years, and they had to reinvest over $2 million to get the tracks runnable. But they did because the first commodities they ran were not passengers. It was iron ore. We'll tell you more about the iron ore, but basically we sold that iron ore to a very large country that has no iron ore on their own, China. We actually got to sell something to China. Well, that rocked on pretty good for several months, about 8 months, and then the Chinese pulled the plug on it because they didn't need that iron ore because scrap steel prices had gone significantly down. But we have run iron ore a few times before, and we started regular passenger operations in 2006, and we are now coming into the little community of Reliance, Tennessee. In town for the railroad. It was his job to keep the original wooden bridge from burning up. You see, the old steam locomotives had a bad habit of throwing hot cinders out their smokestack, dropping hot coals and embers out of their firebox and ash pan. So anytime a steam locomotive powered train passed by, after the train cleared, he would grab 2 buckets of water and walk off down all the way across the bridge. So car 1 right there was the bridge tender's house. Car 2 coming up on it with that rock foundation and the old Reliance depot sign. Car number 3 is about to pass it now. Car number 4 passing by the old bridge tender or watchman's house. Car number 5, look to your left, that's the old watchman's house. Now he did his job very well. In fact, that house stayed occupied until around the 1950s when 2 things happened. First off, they built a new bridge. They built a steel bridge with concrete piers. And they also swapped over to all diesel locomotives in the mid-1950s. So that eliminated the need for having anybody to walk across the bridge and put small fires out. So they sold the house, and they sold it to the Webb family. There we go. Finally kicked in this morning. Caffeine helps. The Webb family, they own that house, but they'll rent it out to you. You can rent the whole house for a big family gathering, or just one room at a time. Each room comes with a small kitchenette and a restroom. Now you can see Webb Brothers Grocery back behind us a little bit and across the river. It's a little white store with a Texaco sign in front of it. And also coming up across the river is the old Union Church, built in the early 1900s. I've heard 1902 and I've heard 1898, so y'all split the difference and we'll say 1900. Now you notice it's a two-story church. That's because the upper story housed the local Masonic Lodge, and ever so briefly it was a school, a one-room schoolhouse. Now when it was a school, it only went from the 1st to the 7th grade. Boys and girls, you didn't have to go to the 8th grade. Guess where you went? To work. Dad needed the boys' help on the farm with the cattle and the crops. Mama needed the girls' help in the kitchen, cooking, cleaning, and canning. Or the boys may hop the train, go to Copperhill, and get a job in the copper mines. Now on the left, you see our friends at Hiwassee Outfitters. Just like our friends at Webb Brothers Grocery, they will rent you a raft, drive you about 5 miles upriver, and let you float gently down the Hiwassee River. Now the Hiwassee is a very gentle flowing river. The worst rapids are called Class 2 rapids, but we don't have any rapids named Grumpy like they do on the A.K.A. River. I think we've got a Dopey, and that's about it. I don't know. But anyway, it's a very, very easy flowing family river. Why, you could float down in an inner tube if that's all you had. But let me warn you about the Hiwassee River's biggest issue. I don't care if it's 100 degrees outside, that water stays bad cold all year long. Man falls in the middle of summertime, he'll still come out singing soprano, I tell you. It is very cold, and the reason it's very cold is a vast majority during the summer comes from the bottom of Lake Appalachian through a great big pipe, down through 2 smaller pipes, and through that powerhouse, and never sees the light of day until he gets outside of a place called the Appalachian Powerhouse. Now our friends at Hiwassee Outfitters, they also have some cabins and the campground you just saw. And our friends at Webb Brothers, of course, they own the old Watchman's House. You can come make a very relaxed weekend here in Reliance next summer. Rafting season starts on Memorial Day weekend and goes through Labor Day weekend. You can ride the raft one day and come back and ride the good old Hiwassee River train the next. Now that we're past Reliance, we are in our eagle zone. We have seen several bald eagles this fall. They get kind of shy during the summertime with all the rafters out there. That's probably the wildest scenery we see. Everybody asks about wildlife. I say, yeah, it's the kayakers out there. But those bald eagles are back now. We've seen several this fall. So if you see one, let us shout out. Let everybody in your car know. If I find out, I will announce it on the PA system. Now, bald eagles are not native to this area. They were brought in the 1970s when they were on the endangered species list by the TWRA and all the wildlife people out west. Well, they settled them here, and they have done very, very well. They share the river with our native bird of prey called the osprey. Now, the bald eagles you'll see circling. They'll circle high above the river, and they've got good enough eyesight to see the fish. But the osprey are unique in that they can hover above the river for a few moments, looking for the fish and then dive on it. So keep a sharp eye out for our bald eagles. I bet we'll have at least 1 or 2 sightings today. Now, coming up in just a few moments on the right side is the first of our ghost towns. Now we call them ghost towns not because we've ever seen a ghost there, but because they used to be fairly big towns, and now they're all gone. Nothing's left of it. The first town we come to is the little town of Probst, Tennessee. Probst was a logging town. They had their own logging railroad, and that railroad went along the banks of Big Lost Creek. Well, they set up shop in 1906, and they did some good lumber business. Now, their sawmill was actually closer to Delano, So they would put the old logs, all those old growth logs, on flat cars and send them to the sawmill, and they cut them into finished lumber there. Their entire operation during its heyday employed almost 200 people. It was a pretty big outfit for this area of Tennessee. And they did good business for a long time, up until about 1925, when the federal government came knocking on their door and said, "Sorry, Mr. Probst, you're going to have to move. This area is becoming part of the Cherokee National Forest, and you can't cut any more trees." So right there, car number 1, look to your right. That's where the town of Probst used to be. Not there anymore. What you see is what you get. Just a little empty field by Big Lost Creek. Car number 2, we're coming into what used to be the old town of Probst. It was run by the Pendergrass Lumber Company. It's a very big industry back in the early 1900s, was logging and lumber in this region. Car number 3, you are passing through the old ghost town of Probst. Car number 4. Look to your right, that's where the town of Probst used to be. Car number 5, passing through the old town of Probst. Now, that small area is still privately owned. There's actually a cabin up on the top of the hill, but all the original buildings are long gone. And Mr. Harvey, when he started on the railroad, remembered when there was still an old house there in 1966 with the family that lived there, but it's long gone. And Probst is no more.
I apologize for the kind of cloudy view out the side here. It's because these windows are a little bit fogged over. I don't think it's from moisture so much as it is from just a haze that's built up over time on these windows. That's on the side. Front's a little bit better. It doesn't have quite as much of a haze on it like the side one does, but it does have a little bit, and it's a little bit dirty too. Not horrible, but a little bit. We are in Cherokee National Forest land here. That's where we're at, along the Hiwassee River. And the Hiwassee River is to our left right now, in the direction we're going. But right now you can't see it through the trees because it's a little bit further over. But we probably will be coming back to it here in a little bit. I'll try to get some more footage of that when we do. And like I promised, we are back at the Hiwassee River, and so I'm getting some more footage of it. Very beautiful river, and they say it's running very full today because of the Appalachian powerhouse. They're running both of the gates through the powerhouse at this time, and it's filled the river up very full at this time. But they say that this river is very big for trout fishing. That is, whenever it's not running so full, they say that the trout fishermen like it better whenever they got it shut off and there's not much water in the middle of the river, so they can get out into the middle of the river where the fish are and be able to actually see them and catch them. And they do a lot of fly fishing here, so very beautiful.
And in Europe. And everybody in the government knew that America would probably be in that war one day, so they planned accordingly. They put this powerhouse out in the middle of nowhere for a very good reason. Their reasoning at the time was enemy spies would have a very hard time finding it and getting through America's defenses to blow it up. Well, now the reality was only very few enemy spies made it to America, and the ones that were let out by the U-boats on the Atlantic coast and the Gulf Coast, they didn't even get the sand out of their shoes before they were caught. We had a very good coastal defense system of both civilian and military people, and every one of them got caught, so nobody blew the powerhouse up. But just in case, they put it in this remote location to avoid being blown up and just to add extra protection. Once it was finished during the rest of the war, it was guarded by a garrison of United States Army soldiers.